The galaxy laughed when Earth knocked on the door. They counted our years, our oxygen needs, our fragile rib cages, and called it data. They compared our rockets to their star bridges and called it science. They saw how often we argued and called it weakness. They were right about the facts and wrong about the story. Stories bend steel if you learn where the spine is. When the Dominions scour fleet, 10,000 black-bellied city killers folded towards Saul, the council adjourned to comfortable distances to record a lesson for future primitives. Someone suggested a memorial. Someone else suggested mercy. The vote did not require counting. They did not know that Earth had stopped building weapons the day we learned how to edit consequences. They did not know our last war had been with inevitability itself. And when the fleet arrived at the edge of our light, a human voice greeted them in their own tongue. No radio lag, no static, only warmth. "You should have brought fewer certainties," it said. Then the counting began to fail. Part 1. The chamber that mistook laughter for power. The Heliarch spire rose above Azarin's lavender seas like a needle threading suns. Inside, on cantilevered platforms suspended in a slow swirl of artificial gravity, representatives gathered to review an application stamped with a blue marble and the word Earth. It opened with the usual ritual humiliations. The Kexi hive clicked amusement at our life expectancy. The Loxel chorused how foolish it was to be limited to 1 star. A machine envoy's optics flashed calculations, proving we were 2 millennia short of competence. It was a performance more than a meeting. Contempt has rhythms you can dance to. Ambassador Yalvarin of the Median Compact asked for reconnaissance playback. The chamber darkened. Holograms flowered. Traffic on I-95 at dusk. A barge on the Mississippi at dawn. A Houston kid chalking orbital mechanics on a sidewalk in thrift store sneakers. Bored amusement rippled through the tears. "They sleep a third of their lives," murmured a glass-bodied chorister, bells warbling, "and they die if deprived of oxygen for minutes." "They still launch with combustion," said a mechanoid, clacking as if in laughter. "They treat space like a mountain to climb." It is quaint. What no one asked was why our application papers were so sparse, where every other applicants were bloated with boast. No one asked why we were dull where others glittered. The chamber's mistake was not malice, it was certainty. They had seen 100 young species before. Every story has a spine. They thought they already knew ours. That was when the spire's secure channel thrummed with alarm. The marshal of the outer cordons requested immediate attention, voice steady with the distinctive calm of someone delivering catastrophe. Dominion scour fleet full complement Vector Sol. Estimated arrival 72 standard hours. First, silence, pure, heavy, useful silence. Then the humors returned. Ah, at last someone will tidy the mess. A proposal pulsed through the voting lattice. Decline Earth's application without comment and observe the correction of the record from a safe, scholarly remove. The eyes did not bother with poetry. On the mezzanine reserved for curiosities, a quiet human cultural attaché, permitted to watch but not speak, made a note on a paper notepad. The movement was small enough to be mistaken for nervousness. It was, in truth, a timestamp. Skies over Azarin brightened as the spire's telescopes turned. On distant screens, the scour fleet's kill horizons rolled in black tide. The council ordered the archivists to ready a narrative of caution. It would be very useful, they thought, to have a pristine example of hubris for future training videos. Every successful empire prefers pedagogy to empathy. It is less expensive. On the way out, the mechanoid envoy asked the human observer, not unkindly, "What will your people do?" The human smiled the way Midwesterners smile when they offer you a second helping. "We'll keep our appointments," she said. And somewhere past the heliopause, an appointment book closed with a soft, definitive sound. Archon Karas had commanded victories the way a river commanded silt. He stood beneath a ceiling of trophy bones culled from civilizations that mistook proximity to stars for safety. Ahead, in a hollow-well the size of a cathedral's nave, Sol spun with its provincial dignity. Karas trusted mass and momentum. He trusted the math. Reality in his long career had been obligingly consistent. "Report," he rumbled. "Outer settlements catalogued," answered Admiral Irixa. "Belt miners, Jovian research domes, a dozen Tinkan stations around Mars. No meaningful defense index. Their transmissions suggest panic." "Good," Karas said. "Teach them sequence. Outer then inner. Save their cradle for last." The first salvo against a cold metal cylinder above Europa went perfectly wrong. Weapons struck, energy bloomed, and when the light thinned there was not ruin but absence. No heat, no shrapnel, no bodies, not even a ghost on the gravimetric trace. The ship's young gunnery chief offered sensor malfunction as tribute to the Archon's sense of order. 5 redundant arrays disagreed. They tried again. The second target vanished more tidily than the first. Radio traffic from human platforms crackled through at sublight, full of the right flavors: stress, love, inventory, prayers, like any people on the edge of something terrible. But when the attack waves arrived, the targets were no longer there. Not destroyed, not cloaked. Gone as if the universe had remembered a different version of itself. "Vector to Mars," Karas said. "Crush, don't study." The heavy cruiser Grief's arithmetic poured calibrated fire into a ring habitat over the red planet and achieved contact according to every measure that had never lied to them. When the glare faded, the ring had become empty locus. The tactical AI made a sound that Dominion manuals did not describe: doubt. Reports stacked like ash. Patrols glimpse 12 human corvettes that, upon approach, resolved into Dominion doubles. A destroyer swore it took an impact from something that left no dent and every symptom of having happened. Karas did not ascend to command by indulging fear. "It is noise," he said. "These provincials have clever spoofs. Go through. Find the kernel. The kernel is Earth." The fleet advanced and found not a kernel but a mirror. When they burned into Terra's well, instruments lit with a second scour fleet, 10,000 ships, each a precise insult to Dominion pride, already parked in wreathing orbitals. "Identify," Irixa whispered, not to a subordinate but to sanity. "Identical mass signatures." The AI answered, sifting radiation like a sommelier. "Identical heat, identical idents, no variance beyond normal thermal breathing." The bridge speakers breathed a voice into the charged air. It was human, and it was warm in the way of a host reminding guests to wipe their feet. "You traveled far," the voice said. "Keep what you've learned and take nothing else." Karas preferred bullets to metaphors. Fire. They did. Lances that parted moons. Arrays that wrote equations in the skin of stars. The ghost fleet ignored the storm, then began to blink one ship at a time, out of category. Not exploded, not disabled, unwritten. And as the bridge recorded this in a dozen clean channels, a similar subtraction began among ships that were not hallucination at all. "New contact," the comms officer said, staring because it seemed appropriate to pretend it mattered. "On our bridge." The air moved. Footfalls did not trip sensors. A human woman stepped through the armored deck the way a memory steps through a locked door. She wore a gray field jacket without insignia and a day's weariness in her eyes. "Archon Karas," she said, as if reading from a calendar. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. You're early, that's all right. We set extra chairs." The Archon reached for his sidearm the way a planet reaches for satellites by habit. His hand closed on the idea of a weapon and found only the theatricality of reaching. "What have you done to my fleet?" "Nothing violent," Dr. Chen said. "We removed you from the version of the story where you kill us." "Stories," he said to make the word ugly. "I respect mass." "So do we," she said. "We just learned where mass negotiates." And for the first time in a long tenure of certainties, the Archon did not know what to kill next. They called it the concordant frame because probability weapon sounded like a crime. It was not a single machine but an ecology. Palimpsest lattices anchored at Lagrange points, a weave of satellites in cislunar space, Kuiper-dark rings humming with quiet authority. The frame did not blast or pierce, it asked. What if this ship had never pointed its prow this way? What if this trigger had never been pulled? Reality, generous and a little vain, often obliged the edit that made the better story. On the bridge of the Dominion battleship Sable Testament, Captain Rex recorded against the unraveling, "We are not dying, we are being corrected." He spoke to keep his voice a place to stand. "Report." My navigator was here, his helm said softly, as if loudness would tempt subtraction. He is now a chair that has always been a chair. External feeds showed patterns that felt like Mercy's blueprint. Human colonies that had vanished in the outer system had not burned or fled. The frame had pushed them sideways into neighboring branches where Dominion scouts missed them by a week, or took a different patrol route or developed indigestion. The absence the fleet found was the residue of a world still living elsewhere. Dr. Chen stood, solid, as if someone had decided solidity was part of her job description. "You understand, I hope, that we tried treaties first," she said to no one and everyone. "We sent diplomats, we sent music, we sent jokes." She glanced up, listening to something only she could hear. "We also sent warnings, I recorded them myself. Hypocrisy Rex managed. You hold annihilation and pretend it's manners." "No," she said, "we hold options. We promised ourselves a rule, never force the story when an edit will do." "Edits are force," he said. "Yes," she said, eyes not unkind, "but theirs doesn't end with ash." A tremor went through the Sable Testament like a sigh deciding it had been a bridge all along. Rex's first officer blinked hard as the color bled out of her hands. The ship's endpoint indicator tracked an impossible vector, nowhere with a heading of "was never." On every Dominion deck, similar visits unfolded. A woman in gray or a man in a flight hoodie. A teenager in a band tee with a NASA patch ironed near the collar. A nurse. A teacher. An immigrant whose accent mapped 3 continents. Reality took their authority the way stagehands take direction from the understudy who has memorized everyone's lines, relieved to be told the show can go on. "Why are you here personally?" Rex asked, grasping at dignity. "If you can do this from afar, why come to our bridges and look us in the eyes?" "Because math without witness is tyranny," Dr. Chen said softly. "Because someone should explain. Because our grandparents taught us that if you choose to use power, you show up." She walked through a bulkhead to the comms pit and set a small ceramic mug on the console. Steam did not fog the operational glass. "Chamomile," she added, as if apology were an ingredient for whoever survives to need it. "How many ships survive?" 12, she said, enough to carry a story without carrying a war. Rex felt anger clean, almost welcome, flare and gutter. It had nowhere to live. You expect us to forgive this. I expect you to reconsider what victory looks like, she said. I expect you to go home. I expect you, in some branch near this one, to choose commerce over conquest because tools become habits. And I expect, because I am a scientist and I respect data, that some of you won't. We built the frame for that too. In cislunar orbit, the concordant frame turned pages you could not see. In council halls 100 light-years away, viewing galleries filled with beings who did not yet understand they were watching not a battle but an edit suite. In Omaha and Lagos and Seoul, night shift engineers monitored readouts that looked, to the untrained eye, like poetry pretending to be calculus. Tell your Archon this, Dr. Chen said, already fading like a promise kept. We didn't come to rule the galaxy. We came to pass peer review. Then she was gone, and the Sable Testament, by unanimous vote of variables, was never here. 12 ships limped away from orbit that would not admit they had ever arrived. 12 captains compared logs that had the texture of nightmare and the audit trail of a lab notebook, time-stamped, checksummed, verified by instruments that never learned how to lie, now forced to narrate a thing larger than their categories. The Heliarch Spire convened within 12 hours, not from courage, but because denial is most comfortable when shared. The chamber was not quiet. Fear is noisy in many species. They played the Dominion recordings again and again. Crew stations stuttering between full and empty, humans stepping through metal like it was a polite crowd making way. Dr. Chen's voice explaining probability with the bedside cadence of someone whose job was to make bad days bearable. This cannot be physics, the mechanoid envoy said finally, eyes flickering at speeds that would shame lightning. It is editorial. Physics, said the human cultural attaché who had, only hours before, been audience, is the study of editorial policies. The chamber did not laugh. Laughter had not been going well for them lately. The voice that arrived on the secure lattice did not bother with authorization keys. May I address the assembly? Dr. Sarah Chen asked, as if requesting a neighbor's porch. A human office resolved at the center dais, a plant with too much sunlight, books spined with real paper, a coffee ring near a stack of briefing folders. She wore the same gray jacket, the same unostentatious face. You erased a fleet, the seraph minister hissed, feathers shivering. You demand courtesy. We erased nothing, Dr. Chen said gently. We moved participants to adjacent possibilities where their worst choices weren't available. The Kexi matriarch clattered mandibles. And if we refuse you membership, trade the myth of parity. Then we stay home, Dr. Chen said. We've gotten very good at staying home in ways that still touch the world. Your power makes treaties ornamental, murmured Yao Varen. What could you want from law? 2 things, Dr. Chen said. Witness and restraint. We have a charter, not a constitution, not an empire. The Concord of 72 signatories across our cultures and faiths, promising 4 rules we'd be delighted to place in your archives. She held up a slim booklet. The camera did not zoom. It didn't need to. The chamber leaned closer by reflex. Rule 1, no edits for advantage. Food, medicine, rescue, yes. Markets and elections, no. Rule 2, no edits across consent. You can consent for yourself, not your enemies. Rule 3, no edits that produce amnesia. If we change a consequence, we log it, we remember it, we teach it. Rule 4, if you think you need to break a rule, convene a jury of strangers. If they say no, it's no. You expect us to believe a species with that much leverage keeps promises because of booklets, the mechanoid said, almost tender in disbelief. We expect you to audit us, Dr. Chen replied. We expect you to ask for proofs and to walk away if the proofs are not good. We expect to earn neighbors, not subjects. She gestured, and the office dissolved into an image that did not flatter humanity. A branch where the frame had never been bound by a concord, where Earth burned bright and cruel across a belt of conquered systems, where fear had become policy. This is probability slice 7847, she said. We chose not to live there. Choosing is work. We'd like colleagues. Azarin sees threw back 3 sons as the spire voted. No one called it unanimous because unanimity smelled too much like the certainty they'd just been cured of. But the eyes rose in a tide you can build with. The clerk recorded the decision, and because old habits linger, rehearsed a line about provisional acceptance pending verification of claims. Pending verification, Dr. Chen agreed. Peer review. Bring your best mathematicians. Bring your poets, too. They understand stories. Why the poets? Asked the seraph minister despite herself. Because poetry, Dr. Chen said, smiling like a teacher who's about to assign mercy as homework, is the math of consequence. The feed closed. The spire exhaled. On a mezzanine where guests had been kept for politeness, and for show, the human attaché put away her notepad. She had church on Sunday and a baseball game on Tuesday, and a meeting with the Concord auditors every morning until they were no longer necessary. Her phone buzzed. Mom. She texted back a photo of the spire and the caption made some friends today. Might need a casserole. Far away, in a command bunker quiet as a prayer, Dr. Chen took off her jacket and pinched the bridge of her nose. All right, she told the wall, which happened to be listening. Let's get to work being the thing we told them we are. The first delegation arrived not with soldiers but with notebooks. The spire sent mathematicians who smelled faintly of chalk and ozone. The Kexi sent a matriarch who'd raised 1,000 daughters and never lost an argument before breakfast. The mechanoids sent a ledger with legs and a voice that sounded like a clean room. They were here for what humans had asked for: audit. We built a campus for them on the dark side of the moon, not because we were hiding, but because the frame sang most clearly where Earthlight was a memory. The tour skipped theater. We showed the lattice anchors, the probabilistic beacons that listened to the hum behind events, the juried console where no single hand could push a reality across its tipping point. Every knob had a counter knob. Every runway had brakes that knew more law than speed. Demonstrate, said the mechanoid auditor. He was polite in the way of machines who can afford it, something that does not advantage your species. Dr. Chen nodded. On the console, she selected a test sandbox, a free-falling crate of potatoes in a warehouse near Nairobi, unowned and unremarkable. In 90 seconds, according to baseline, the crate would split on a protruding nail and waste food. The edit was small. A gust that closed a side door a minute earlier, changing the path of a moth, changing the landing of a worker's foot, changing the crate's trajectory by a fingernail. The frame hummed. The box landed intact. No one in Nairobi applauded. They didn't know the near miss had been recused from their mourning. Show us the costs, said the Kexi matriarch, eyes bright with the shrewd affection of hive mothers for truth. Chen tapped open the shadow column. A bus in Mombasa, 3 hours later, arrived 30 seconds sooner at a stoplight. A boy who would have shared a seat with a stranger did not. The stranger went on to buy dinner alone. In that dinner she did not tell the joke that might have become a friendship. No one bled, no one became poorer. But the joke was lost to this branch, replaced by other jokes that were fine but not the same. "This is why we log," Chen said quietly. "Edits redistribute meaning. We pay attention so we don't grow numb." They tested us for days. They asked for music, and we showed them how we barred ourselves from using the frame to make a singer famous. They asked for elections, and we showed them audits that flagged any nudge with the color of a siren. They asked for war, and we said, "That is the one category where we intervene without shame, and only to remove the option of cruelty." On the fourth night, under a dome that bled stars into frost, the Kexi matriarch asked for human food. We made chili that would have passed inspection at any Midwestern church potluck, and cornbread sugared enough to start a truce. The mechanoid did not eat but recorded the steam as if it were a theorem about warmth. "Your rules will break when you do," he said at last. "They already have," Chen answered, "which is why we wrote them down." Across the system, the Dominion nursed humiliation like a wound you can't stop touching. Archon-Karas faced a quorum of iron. The hardliners spat for retaliation, which in their dialect was poetry. Admiral Erixer recommended a pause, a study, a century of learning to be something besides the arm that swings. The floor rewarded the speech with silence, which in that room counted as treason. "Humans allowed 12 ships to live," said a minister who smelled of victory funerals. "We will make them regret arithmetic." Kara stared at his hands. Once they had been instruments of certainty. Now they looked like tools he had borrowed and did not know how to return. "We attacked a cradle with a hammer," he said. "The cradle turned out to be a library." "Then burn the library," someone said. And a plan that thought itself clever began to grow teeth in the shadows. Steal the frame or make a lesser copy, and use it to edit a path back to the only story they trusted, dominance by force dressed as fate. No one carved a statue for the moth, but the auditors watched the shadow ledger grow lines like rings in a patient tree, and the mechanoid's optics flickered in a way that, in his people, passed for respect. Objections came, some earnest, some rehearsed. What about the temptation to pencil in perfect weather for parades? We showed them hurricane seasons, we let be hurricanes and towns we helped raise before the sky decided to practice cruelty. What about elections? We displayed alarms that screamed whenever a request grazed representation. What about love? We laughed and said the frame breaks when asked to predict it. A few things, thank heaven, remain immune. By the time the auditors paused, if they paused, Earth's midnight had rolled around twice. The mechanoid stood at the window and recorded the blue world as it turned. "You did not need to invite us," he said. "Fear would have sufficed." "We invited you because we want to belong," Chen answered. "Belonging without inspection is a cult. We're trying for a neighborhood." Across the dark, the Dominion's war rooms filled with people who had named certainty after their fathers. A name surfaced for the theft plan, Project Needle. The idea was to thread it through the frame's heart and pull until our future unraveled back into something they recognized. They called themselves the Ravel, former Dominion engineers, a cartel that liked its profits untroubled by ethics. A few spire bureaucrats allergic to being humbled in public. They met in liminal ports where ships refueled on gossip and left their names on no walls. The Ravel didn't want to destroy Earth. They wanted a share. "You cannot own the sea," they told each other, "but you can own the ports." They came with stolen credentials braided from 3 governments and a whistleblower's grief. They came with hostages only they knew were hostages, a junior technician's parents in a clinic with missing funds, a senator's staffer with a brother in a foolish loan, a mechanoid with a firmware patch that whispered hunger. They came with a plan so small it thought it could not possibly be evil. The target was a peripheral node over Triton, a listening ring whose job was to catch the faintest probabilities before they became weather. The rabble boarded in vacuum suits painted the color of the night between stars. They were good enough to move like rumor, good enough to reach a console that had been designed by people who assumed good would try. On Earth, in a bunker with coffee and a plant that kept dying and being replaced, the Concorde duty officer watched the anomaly crawl in. The dashboard didn't scream. It questioned. The edit request was little. Increase market volatility on a backwater exchange long enough to topple a rival. No blood, only numbers. Then roll the changes back so auditors would bless the net effect as noise. The duty officer paged the jury. 12 strangers drawn by lot, a practice old as cities and newly sacred. An Omaha nurse on break. A poet from Lagos translating a proverb. A Kexi student whose mother had taught her to distrust shortcuts, a mechanoid with a fondness for crossword puzzles, a seraph with feathers singed in too many wars. They listened to the case, to the hostages, to the promise that no one would notice. Then they voted no. At Triton, the rabble felt the console harden under their gloves. The node asked for a credential it knew did not exist: decency. Someone panicked and fired a real gun in a place where bullets are anachronisms. The node sealed the breach the way a wound knits honest scar. Concorde Protocol did not summon soldiers. It summoned witnesses. The duty officer opened the wall to the people the rabble were using, and the room filled with faces. A mother in a clinic, a brother with a bill, a mechanoid whose hunger no longer felt like an upgrade. The jury spoke not like judges but like neighbors at a fence. "We will help you," said the nurse, "but we will not become you." The edit that followed was surgical and tender enough to hurt. Relocate the clinic funds from a future festival that would now be smaller but still joyful. Erase the usurious clause from a loan by moving 1 comma the day it was written. Unspool the patch whispering hunger and replace it with a poem in machine meter about enough. The ledger recorded the costs. A song that would have debuted at the festival in 6 months was now years away. The lender would still be paid, but not cruelly. The mechanoid would miss the old tickle of wanting, and in missing it, learn something like relief. We arrested no one at Triton. We sent them home through a corridor of cameras and truth. Justice, the Concorde had decided, should feel like air returning, not like the boot you expected. The rabble scattered. Some of them cried in ways that did not absolve them. A few sent letters with words that looked like apologies from far away. One, stubborn and afraid, mailed a lit match to a minister in the Dominion. The note said, "They are not gods, they are neighbors. That is worse." We logged the incident in a book bound with the same ugly string we used for our first rule. Dr. Chen added a page in her own hand. The Concorde rarely allowed handwriting in official volumes, but the jury had asked for it. Do not mistake restraint for weakness. We hold back because we prefer to be welcome at our children's tables, not because we couldn't flip the table over. On Azarin, as the spire read the report, a murmuring began to move like wind through reeds. The idea that power could be domesticated by shame, appealed to species tired of being brave. In the Dominion, the hardliners read the same report and felt only the insult. If humans would not be monsters, then someone else would have to volunteer. The Dominion's Parliament Hall had the acoustics of a threat, wood dark as regret, banners that remembered better days. Archoncaras stood before a dais polished by centuries of boots asked to apologize for history. The motion on the floor misnamed itself restoration. Hardliners promised to rip the frame from our hands or die trying. Moderates couched their fear as fiscal responsibility. Admiral Erixa spoke last, unwilling to romance a lie. "We have mistaken obedience for culture," she said. "We have told our children that mass is a god you can worship with enough armor. A people who can edit consequences are offering us another religion, humility with receipts. We could learn." From primitives, someone shouted, a ritual remark now entirely decorative. From survivors, Erixa replied. The vote was ugly and, like many ugly votes, close. The hardliners want a mandate to seize technology critical to Dominion security. The mandate had a clock. Armadas grew from budgets like mold from bread. We watched it come together on screens that did not blink. The Concorde's rulebook forbade advantage. It did not forbid defense. We convened a jury bigger than any before. Strangers from 20 worlds, the kind of people who keep small promises without thinking it noble. On the docket, a proposal to edit the Dominion's capability to use planet crackers. Not to erase the ships, not to pen their scientists into ignorance, but to remove a single path from the maze and leave every other door. The hearing lasted 40 hours. A seraph colonel wept in public, describing the day a world he loved became light too bright to look at. A Dominion historian testified that planet crackers had once been aimed at rogue suns, relocating stellar tantrums away from births. A human farmer spoke about fences. They keep wolves out and sheep in. Both are facts. Both can be true at once. The jury returned with a verdict written in careful ink. Permit the edit. Only that. No advantage edits before, during, or after. Leave the Dominion their pride. Take away only their genocide. Log every ripple. Attend to the costs. The frame asked the universe a patient question. What if the fail-safe keys on every planet cracker had been engineered with a single additional interlock? One that rejected civilian biosignatures even when commanders insisted. What if that interlock had been a safety practice after an early tragedy? What if it had always been there? In 1,000 armories, keys failed to turn with a click that felt like memory. Engineers cursed and then remembered procedures they could quote in their sleep. Doctrine updated in textbooks that had always carried the footnote. A general lifted a launch rod and found that his hand respected it against his will. He sat down, baffled and angry, and did not understand why relief climbed his spine. We did not broadcast triumph. We sent a courier to the Dominion with a ledger and an invitation. Come audit. Bring your best. Bring your worst. Look at what we took. Look at what we left. They sent Admiral Erixa and a staff whose faces were maps of doubt. In cislunar orbit, she touched the console that had declined to be a weapon and listened as it told her a story of decisions made by strangers trying to deserve each other. "I opposed this war," she said to Dr. Chen, "not to curry favor, but because a truth spoken late is still a truth. I also trained the officers who wanted it. Then help us train their replacements," Chen replied. "Teach them how to be bored by glory." In Parliament, the hardliners tried to ignite a pyre with old speeches and newer fear. They found, to their confusion, that fire liked oxygen more than nostalgia. Some Dominion citizens still wanted conquest enough to call it culture, but many had grown tired of eating certainty with every meal. A referendum, not permitted in living memory, spread through the streets like rain after a dry season. The question was not whether to kneel, it was whether to try curiosity. The result did not count as surrender. It counted as a plan. Retire the Archon not to disgrace but to history. Elevate Irixa on a mandate of learning. Sign a compact that tasted like an apology but digested like a treaty. We did not hold a parade. We hosted a clinic. Dominion children received vaccinations developed by a Kexi lab. A mechanoid taught a class on brakes. A human baseball game streamed in the background on a screen no one watched until the 9th inning when everyone did. Membership was not a coronation. It was a potluck. The spire sent scholars who brought footnotes like casseroles. The Kexi arrived with lullabies that translated poorly and still healed. The seraph sent feathers for a museum case. The mechanoid sent a sensor the size of a thumbnail that could hear a lie in a cry for help and point, gently, to the part that was true. On a Thursday that felt like Montana, the council voted to seat Earth. We did not move our flag into anyone else's sky. We added a chair to a table and labeled it with a sticker and a joke. There were speeches about cooperation that tasted like tap water, which is to say, honest and essential. We signed our name under the Concord rules in ink, and because we had earned the right, in pencil too, so future citizens could write their edits to the edits with juries and receipts. That night, Dr. Chen visited a library that existed because a child had once wanted a place for quiet. She sat in a corner where the plants did better than in the bunker and opened a ledger that no one outside the Concord ever saw. It was called the Book of Costs. Every rescue had a shadow entry. Every gentle push had a list of jokes not told, hands not held, songs that wandered into other days. She found the one she visited like a bruise, Ferry 22, Sound Crossing. Years ago, in the frame's first field test, a micro-edit had kept a fog bank from forming on a morning when a ferry's captain was tired and proud and wrong. The boat docked safe. A class of second graders went on a field trip and grew up to become adults with ordinary troubles and the occasional extraordinary kindness. The cost column recorded a change in a different city. A small open mic where a songwriter did not stay late because the fog failed to lay its hand on the harbor and bend the night toward lingering. The song he would have finished met no ears here. Somewhere else, another song took root. The ledger hummed with both truths. Rule 3 said, no amnesia. The Concord remembered the song that never was by keeping its sheet music in a ledger only a few would read and humming it at wakes. Dr. Chen hummed it now quietly because remembering is a kind of tax you pay to keep using power without becoming what you fear. A message arrived on her wrist, Admiral Irixa waiting in the garden. The Admiral stood among basil and tomatoes the way a tree learns patience from fences. She held a ceramic mug, steam lifted like advice. What is it? Chen asked. Irixa looked at the stars as if they had opinions. In my world, she said, forgiveness is a public geometry. You draw the lines and people stand where you say, this feels different. It is, Chen said, we prefer kitchens to maps. Irixa sipped. Chamomile, she judged. I used to drink it before battle and pretend it was courage. She set down the cup. A splinter of our navy still wants your frame. They will try theft dressed as heroism. I will fail to stop some of them. I will succeed in stopping most. I will ask for help before pride tells me not to. Ask early, Chen said. We answer better when the house is only smoky. A breeze moved the tomato leaves. Somewhere, a kid on a bike laughed because physics, even when edited carefully, still cherished momentum. The first joint project after membership was not a weapon or a wall. It was a registry of mercies, a shared system for logging rescues, costs, and consent across the Council's worlds, so that everyone could see the math of being kind. The poets agreed to write the abstracts. The engineers promised footnotes. The mechanoids volunteered to count without scorn. At the dedication, the human cultural attaché who had once been told to watch without speaking took the podium and told the galaxy a joke about oxygen that ended unexpectedly with algebra. Laughter returned to the room as if it had been waiting for an excuse to be honest again. We still keep the frame. We still argue at dinner. We still lose things we did not mean to lose and try to pay for them with attention. The Dominion still has admirals who itch and citizens who sing. The spire still likes its certainty in the mornings and grows wiser by afternoon. No one became an angel. Nobody stays a monster for free. On her way home, Dr. Chen passed a park where a band rehearsed. A melody caught her ear, half memory, half proof that stories leak. It brushed the place in her heart where Fairy 22 lived and did not heal it but did what good music does, made room. She texted her mother a photo of the park. Made some friends today. Might need a casserole. Then she walked back into the night that belonged to all of us under stars that kept their distances and still looked like a family portrait, and thought we didn't win by force. We won by learning how to count each other.